So here the question is about the validity or the importance of being a student. How valid is it? That's what I mean by validity. How important is it in one's development if a person is expected to be progressing? Is it necessary to, at one point or another at least, to be a student? I remember years ago I've seen I think it was a documentary or it was a news piece, a video news release where it showed an octopus in a small aquarium that was trying to figure out how to eat this piece of prawn or shrimp that was deposited, placed inside this small little, what looked like a small treasure chest, miniature. But the scientist, without showing it to the octopus how to unlock that small miniature treasure chest, hid the shrimp, hid the prawn inside, and then walked away. Because they are very apprehensive, very shy animals, yet very intelligent, I found out soon enough, the scientists had to leave the room. Meanwhile, there were cameras, and there was also a one-sided mirror, you could see. So they could see what was being done, recording it. That's how we also saw this. Well, the octopus tried so hard to open it, but it couldn't figure it out. And then after some time, the scientist returned, and in front of, even though the octopus pulled back to one corner of the aquarium, the scientist unlocked the tiny little treasure chest, pulled out the shrimp, the prawn, and put it back, placed it back, covered the lid, and then in plain sight, locked it back again, the latch basically. And then he walked away again from the room. Cameras rolling, and guess what happens immediately after he leaves? The octopus reached over with its tentacles without any issue, unlocked that latch, moved it out of the way, opened up the lid, and was having lunch. Now the interesting thing was, as if this was not enough, interesting enough, they brought another aquarium with another octopus, exact copy. And then this octopus did not know how to unlock, because this one also had a shrimp in there, in the tiny little box. But they placed these two aquariums facing each other. So now both octopi, the two of them, knew about the other's presence. And they placed, therefore, prawn in each of these boxes, in each individual aquarium, and walked away. As before, the first octopus reached over, opened up the box, grabbed the shrimp, and started eating it. Guess what the other octopus was doing meanwhile? It was carefully observing what this one did. And lo and behold, this one also does, without any hesitation, goes, opens it directly, and eats its delicious prawn. Now, why am I reminded of this? We're living at a time period where people abhor, they despise not being seen as masters at something, not being experts at something. Everybody wants to be an expert, an alpha as they call it, somebody who's so advanced, somebody who's completed the journey, somebody who is wise, somebody who is, somebody. And this is truly spread out everywhere. The question's asking about basically being a student. That first octopus was the teacher of the second one, because the octopus showed the other octopus how to do it. That's the role of a teacher. Now, the teacher is doing whatever they can, if they are true teachers, in whatever discipline, not just in matters of spiritual development. In every endeavor. So if this teacher / octopus, no matter how often, how many times it tried to show the other one, the latter octopus who came in later, if that second octopus turned its back, or decided to look away, or ignore, or say, no, that's not how you open it, and it's not the first octopus's mistake. They're not doing anything wrong. Today, the majority of practitioners are choosing the path of, I know this, I got this, I'm going to do this on my own. That's what you have basically in the whole Goenka movement. That's what it is. There's no teacher. They have title of, teacher assistant, something like that, TAs or ATs as they call them, assistant teachers, but they are, as one person told me a long time ago, a practitioner of the Goenka system, they're not ATs as in assistant teachers, they are audio technicians. That always got a laugh out of me, because that's absolutely true with the Goenka thing, because what they're doing, these ATs or audio technicians, they're just hitting play and stop, pause, and when you go and ask them, they have no clue what it is. They just say, tape, listen to this tape, that tape. And Goenka didn't even know what he was talking about. So it was very much, blindly following, which has nothing to do with the Dhamma. But this is not also something peculiar or unique to the Goenka movement, which is one of the reasons why it's spreading, by the way. That and other ulterior and clandestine movements that are happening to make it be so well spread around the world, so much funding. Anyhow, what I'm trying to get to is, whether it's that or the whole movement for mindfulness thing that people have been writing books on, and you see it in every country nowadays. Every therapist, if they have that attached to their name or their licensure, something, or certification in MBCT or something like that, having done a weekend retreat or have done this year-long course in mindfulness, then they are seen as legitimate therapists or legitimate practitioners. But my question is, who was their teacher? Who were these people who are passing out these certificates, making huge sums of money meanwhile? But that's not the point. The point is the person reading on these things, on these mindfulness series. There is no commitment. You pick up the book and you read on mindfulness, and guess what? Before you go ahead and start your own certification program, you feel like you have this, you got it, you figured it out. Remember what I was saying? Everybody wants to become a master. They want to be on the fast track of becoming experts. And this is why not only is this phenomenon a terribly dangerous one within the context of spiritual development, but as a humanity at large. When you have not just young kids doing this, people in their 50s, 40s, 30s, 20s, etc., they have convinced themselves that all they need to do is watch a couple of videos on YouTube or this or that, and or read a book, and or participate in these forums, and they're good to go. Not only does this indicate the presence of terribly solidified, crystallized sense of conceit in the person, which is what we have basically at the crux of this matter of not wanting to be a student. But at the same time, it is dangerous because all of these skills that human beings have developed, not just in the realm of spiritual education, development, but how to hit a hammer, how to build something, how to carve something, how to lay the tiles, how to lay bricks, how to bake a cake, how to bake a pizza, or make the dough, how to paint on the walls. People have become so deluded that guess where all the skills are going? The workforce is going. People have become lazy, and they're thinking of that as being a strong point in them. That, see, I'm independent. I'm an independent person. I don't need to rely. And this is, I'm bringing you back to the main question here about how important is it, how valid is it to be a student. It's extremely valid, especially now. One of the reasons why the Dhamma is dying is because of that. The Buddha's teachings, because for a long time scholars have been making it their domain. They considered themselves as the experts. Meanwhile, they have no clue what the Buddha said because they're so lost in their own conceit. So you have that on one front, and on the other you have individuals who came up throughout history who dumbed down, watered down the Buddha's teaching so much that nothing was left. So it was reverted back into some type of a cult, into some kind of a folk religion. And today what we have in the world, as far as Buddhism is concerned, is that. It has turned into some type of a cult, which is what you see in Goenka. The same thing with the mindfulness thing. Everybody's pushing for something because others are doing it. And it has to do with propaganda. Now, when you have a genuinely practicing student who has found himself or herself a genuine practicing teacher, what happens is there's no need for looking for any propaganda to feel good about one's practice. They don't need to look here, go there, to explore here, explore there, in order for them to feel good about who and where they are in their life and in their practice. This is where maturity develops. So you're never going to get maturity overnight happen to you. So that's how I would address this question, this double-pronged question. Because there is a tremendous presence of conceit in people's hearts today. And this is in the case of the majority. I'm not saying all, of course, you can never say that, because there are always exceptions, I'm happy to say. But the problem lies in the fact that many people will gravitate towards so-called disciplines, which are anything but discipline, by the way. by the enforcement of their own strong will, just like when you're doing a fast or when you're doing a crazy diet, okay? You're disrupting the natural flow of life, or you are abstaining from doing something, what Lord Buddha would call this ascetic practices, because it's just a matter of willpower. No pain, no gain. And people do this temporarily for a time period, but it creates an addiction in them. Why? Because there's nobody over you to whom you have to answer as to where you are. When I was studying in the Fine Arts Academy after high school, we would sit in a circle and there would be an object the instructor would bring, let's say, sometimes real fruits, sometimes just plastic fruits, sometimes just objects, and he would arrange it in a certain way, so we have 360 view of it, each one of course in different perspective. And we would have, our own easel or chevalet, whatever you have the paper upon, and you're drawing with a pencil. And we didn't use any razors. There's nothing like that over there at that level. So you're just, whatever happens, you gotta, every stroke of lead on the paper, you had to count for it. You had to back it up. You had to be prepared before the charcoal touched the white paper. But what I'm saying here, what I'm driving at, is that the instructor would be walking around the room, constantly checking, going over, and then give instructions. Yes, doing it this way is correct, but try this. No, don't do it this way. I told you not to do this. What is that? That is someone instructing, that is someone guiding. Why? Because he happened to know, he had been there, just like that octopus, the first one. And the job of the person to whom he is speaking, if they want to really learn the skill, they need to stay put on that stool and sit there and keep working at it. Suck it up, as they say, to really put their pride aside. And that's something we don't have happening en masse. And that's why you have people going and practicing so-called meditation. What type of meditation? When you look, it's laughable. They make quotes from here and there, from the Buddha, from, let's say, Webu Sayadaw or some great noble teacher, and then you look, you go ahead, participate, and you see, it's a joke. It has nothing to do with the real practice. It's all a matter of ego, and that's what we have. So if you are sitting there in that fine arts class and the instructor came and said something, but meanwhile you were pretending or behaving as if you already have made it, that's not going to go well, because you won't be able to swallow your pride and you're going to say, no, I don't need this, I know better than this, and you would get up and leave. Some people left. I think there was 12 of us, and then eventually there were, I think, 5 or 7 left. But why? Because it takes guts to be a student. That's what I'm trying to say. You have to have a real, genuine intention. You have to have a good purpose. It has to have a meaning for you in order for you to really put your childish ways of thinking, your old narratives aside, and really be guided. We have countless examples of this in the suttas, in the discussions, in the discourses given by the Buddha. I know in the Anguttara Nikaya, for example, one of the many books, there are so many suttas there. Lord Buddha is making references to the thoroughbred horse, comparing the thoroughbred stallion horse to a colt. Similarly to the ox, thoroughbred ox, to a wild one over there that's never, the only thing that's going to be served out of that ox or bull is going to be, somebody's going to buy and butcher it. Turn out to be nothing but food and the hide for clothing or something. And that's what you have a lot of today's. Not just in spiritual arena, everywhere. I have spoken to individuals who complain to me, I remember, that they can't find good artisans, good people with skill, whether it's roofers, to build a good solid roof that could withstand wind and rain and, erosion and things like that, to people who can paint, people who can serve in the restaurant, as a waiter, waitress. There's a lot of ego. Everybody thinks they got it when they have no idea. Many of them have never even graduated high school or university properly, because you have that No Child Left Behind thing, which taught kids to be lazy because they are already unique. They are already unique. Well, if you think that you are already unique and you keep doing your own, fireworks of that, without having anything to show for it other than what your mom keeps telling you, so long as she's alive, what we have is today, unfortunately, individuals who are not ready for the spiritual practice, really. Because they use meditation, they use, in any discipline, I mentioned, just roughly 2 of them, but they never penetrate. They cannot penetrate unless something clicks in them. Because even to get a book out, a book that is not familiar to you, a book that challenges your beliefs, a book that it goes to the core, but it challenges where and what you have come to believe and understand and are convinced of to be the truth, even though you've never been disciplined like that thoroughbred. Because you have come up with your own quasi methods of, I can withstand this, I can, difficult climactic situations and temperature, this and that, I can expose myself to difficult situations and I can sit for days without moving, all that jazz. That's all ego, though. Has nothing to do with the practice. But to be able to sit down and tell a teacher, how do I do this? How do you go about doing this? Could you help me? This really changes everything for the individual. For the first time, they're actually on the right path. For the first time, they are on the right path because they have come out of their childhood, childish, infantile ways of thinking. Unfortunately, there's so many people in there, almost 40, if not more, 50, that have never really been in a position of being a student. How in the world are you going to learn anything? That's why you have a lot of people who behave like as if they're jack of all trades, but they're master of none, truly, as the saying goes. But they carry themselves as Renaissance men and women, that they know everything, like Leonardo da Vinci, like they know everything. They are experts at this. Why? Because, and this is foolishness, because the sadness in the person's life is clear indication, the unhappiness, where they are in their lives. But that also requires humility for them to look in the mirror and say, what am I doing? A student asks that. That's why it's healthy to be a student. You had individuals who were 4th level awakened, meaning full arahants, in their 80s, some even older, who would come to the Buddha, they would bow down to the Buddha. You had examples of Venerable Sariputta bowing down to a young little pupil because the pupil reminded him of something. And Venerable Sariputta, who was the chief disciple, who was second only to the Buddha in wisdom. Even in his old age, he would, whenever he saw that young boy, he would bow out of respect. I've mentioned this to even bhikkhus, and they were flat out refusing to believe such a thing. There you go. So, don't be fooled by the outside appearance. So, because that's also going to try to make our job easy, not to investigate. So a true student is also a very good, courageous, I have to add, investigator. A student is not somebody who just bows their head and is like, yeah, they're always going to be subjugated to do something that is against their will. No. Nowhere, in no way, a teacher has the right to abuse, torture, to belittle for the sake of belittling or trying to destroy the individuality of the student. I used to believe this and say this and live up to this principle even when I was a middle school, junior high teacher. I said this to countless students I've had. I'm never going to tell you what to think. Nowadays, people are repeating these statements, even on some programs I've heard. People say, teaching them how to think, not what to think. That's a beautiful statement. I used to say this 20, 30 years ago to students, and I hope they still remember them. Now they're in their 30s, 40s, wherever they are in the world. But what I'm trying to highlight here is the job of the teacher is to help the student grow and become this wonderful, truly master. But how in the world are you going to become a master without becoming a student first? That's the dilemma that these people have. Because they want to overshoot, fast forward that period because they think it's unpleasant. The same thing as somebody who wants to get the body into good shape. If you want to have that pectoral muscles, the chest muscles, if you want to have good biceps, if you want to have good legs, well, there are certain exercises you have to do. You have to do those squats, you have to do those chest presses, incline, decline, you have to do those push-ups. You have to work with the rings, all these things, dumbbells, all these things, but you have to do it consistently, not just once. Not just once. And who's going to guide you? Well, at least people are smart enough to hire a trainer or have somebody like that, following a system. So the same thing applies, especially in this area of spiritual progress. If there is one to be made, spiritual progress, that is, then one has to be willing to really go the distance. It requires perfection, not what you think is perfection. The job of the teacher is to help you get there. And in many cases, even surpass the teacher. If they are a true teacher, they're fine with that. They're fine with that. So there's no point in, squeezing, the student into this subhuman status. No, that's complete wrong perception. But you must have a guide, and in order for you to have a guide, you have to be willing to be guided. Everybody wants to have a good teacher, this and that, but that's why many people have gone and it's like, oh yeah, so-and-so, very famous usually, very, very famous celebrity status teacher. Oh, he's my teacher. How? Well, I listened to his talks or I've followed his teachings. How? Through his books, and oh, okay. So you've never encountered, yeah, I've written to him, but I'm waiting for my response. For me to get his response. Oh, that also creates these boundaries between yourself and that so-called teacher who's not a teacher. Why? Because it's a buffer zone that makes you feel comfortable being where you are, unchanged. Meanwhile, you're living under the delusion that you are actually being guided. So humility is absolute must. Otherwise, you can't even lay one single brick. You have to say, I'm sorry. You have to say, I don't know. And we're living in a culture that is not willing to say that because they don't believe that. And that's why everywhere you see this decrepit status in the world, unfortunately. People were building buildings in New York City, skyscrapers, over 150 years ago that bedazzle architects to this day. They don't know how, they don't have manpower who could do that. Because it required discipline, it required people who were willing to accept if they did wrong. And if they want to improve, this is where the student's role comes in. You have to be willing to improve upon where you are, what you are. Otherwise, whatever gifts you have come with in this world, the other day I was mentioning about old kamma and new kamma that the Buddha has mentioned. What you came with is the old kamma. What you do with that old kamma, be it your wealth, where you're born, how you're born, health, all that, the good stuff. All that is old kamma. What you do with those things that many others don't have, what you do with them is the new kamma. So many people, unfortunately, have wonderful old kamma to this day, but they don't know how to turn it into new, good, wholesome, skillful kamma, because their eyes are blindfolded with their egos and refusal to come out of their ignorance. That's why I call avidya willful ignoring. That's what the Buddha called delusion, moha, which is one of the three poisons in the heart. So long as we have those three poisons in the heart, it's impossible for the person to see the light, to become awakened. The other two poisons being lust or passion, greed basically, and the other one is hatred, which we have a lot of that, as those two as well in the world. But a true teacher is one who will point these things out. And the job of the student is to come and ask the teacher, in the case of a monk, Bhante, what do you think I'm doing wrong? Bhante, I am doing this, but I have this happening. Would you be able to clarify? Am I on the right track? Something like that. Which is saying, I don't know, teacher. Could you help me? And that is like moving mountains for the person, however, in this generation of people. So I'll just leave you with that. Make whatever you want to make out of it. Okay? Sukhya.